The King of the Golden Mountain. There was once a merchant who had only one child, a son, who was very young and barely able to run alone. He had two richly laden ships making a voyage upon the sea, with all his properties on board, in the hope of making great gains. When the news came that they had all gone to the bottom of the sea. Thus, from being a rich man, he became all at once so very poor that nothing was left to him but one small plot of land. In order to drive his misfortune a little out of his thoughts, he went out to his field, thinking with no great comfort on what he had been, what he was now, in what condition he was going to be in. When out of nowhere there stood before him a little rough-looking black dwarf. "Hey, friend, why so sorrowful?" said he to the merchant. "What is it you take so deeply to heart?" "If you would do me any good, I would willingly tell you," said the merchant. "Who knows but I may," said the little man. "Tell me what ails you, and perhaps you will find me of some use." Then the merchant told him how all his wealth was gone to the bottom of the sea, and how he had nothing left but that little plot of land. "Do not trouble yourself," said the dwarf, "if you will promise to give me the first thing that rubs itself against your leg when you return it home, and to bring it here to its place in 12 years' time, you shall have as much money as you will." The merchant thought, "What can that be but my dog?" and did not remember his little boy. So he said yes, gave the man a written and sealed promise, and went home. When he reached home, his little boy was so glad to see him that he crept behind him and laid fast hold of his legs and looked up in his face and laughed. The father was shocked, for he remembered his promise and now knew what he had pledged himself to do. As, however, he still found no money in his chest, he thought the dwarf had only been joking. A month afterwards, he went up to the garret, intending to gather together some old tin and to sell it, and saw a great heap of money lying. Then he was happy again, made purchases, became a greater merchant than before, and felt that this world was well governed. In the meantime, the boy grew tall, and at the same time sharp and clever. But the nearer the 12th year approached, the more anxious grew the merchant, that his distress was even seen in his face. One day his son asked what ailed him, but the father would not say. The boy, however, persisted so long that at last he told him that without being aware of what he was doing, he had promised him to a black dwarf, and had received much money for doing so. Then said the son, "Oh, father, do not be uneasy. All will go well. The black man has no power over me." When the time came, the father and son went out together to the place agreed upon, and the son drew a circle on the ground, and set himself and his father in the middle of it. The little black dwarf soon came, and walked round and round about the circle, but could not find any way to get into it, and he either could not or dared not jump over it. At last the boy said to him, "Have you anything to say to us, my friend, or what do you want?" Now the son of the merchant had found a friend, a good fairy that was fond of him, and had told him what to do, for this fairy knew what good luck was in store for him. "Have you brought me what you said you would?" said the dwarf to the merchant. The old man was silent, but the son asked, "What do you want here?" The dwarf said, "I come to talk with your father, not with you." "You have cheated and taken in my father," said the son. "Give him up his bond at once." "Fair and softly," said the dwarf. "Right is right. I have paid my money, and your father has had it and spent it, so be so good as to let me have what I paid it for." "You must have my consent to that first," replied the son, "so let us talk it over." The dwarf grinned and showed his teeth, as if he should have been very glad to get into the circle if he could. They spoke together for a long time after this, but at last they agreed that the son, as he did not belong to the enemy to the mankind, nor yet to his father, should seat himself in a small boat, which should lie on water which was flowing away from them, and that the father should push it off with his own food, and then the son should remain given up to the water. So he took leave of his father, placed himself in a little boat, and the father had to push it off with his own feet. The boat capsized, so that the Nile was uppermost, and the father believed his son was lost, and went home and mourned for him, while the dwarf went his way, thinking that at any rate he had had his revenge. The boat, however, did not sink, for the good fairy took care of her friend, and soon raised the boat up again, and it went safely on. The young man sat safe within, till at length it ran ashore upon an unknown land. As he jumped upon the shore, he saw before him a beautiful castle, but empty and dreary within, for it was enchanted. "Here," said he to himself, "I must find the prize the good fairy told me of." So he once more searched the whole palace through, till at last he found a white snake lying coiled up on a cushion in one of the chambers. The snake, however, was an enchanted maiden, who rejoiced to see him and said, "Have you at last come to set me free? 12 long years have I waited here for the fairy to bring you as promised. This kingdom is bewitched, and you must set it free." "How can I do that?" he inquired. "Tonight 12 men will come. Their faces will be black, and they will be dressed in chain and armor. They will ask what you are doing here. Keep silence, however, give them no answer, and let them do what they will do with you. They will torment you, beat you, stab you. Let everything pass. Only do not speak. At 12 o'clock they must go away again. The second night 12 others will come, and the third night 24, who will even cut off your head. But at the 12th hour of the night their power is gone. And then if you have endured all, and has not spoken the slightest word, I shall be released. I will come to you, and will have in a bottle some of the water of the life. I will rub you with that, and you will come to life again, and be as healthy as before." Then he said, "I will gladly set you free." Everything happened just as she said. The black man could not force a single word from him, and on the third night the snake became a beautiful princess, who came with the water of life and brought him back to life again. She threw herself into his arms and kissed him, and there was a joy and gladness in the whole castle. After this, their marriage was celebrated, and he was king of the Golden Mountain. They lived very happily together, and the queen bore a fine boy. 8 years had already gone by. When the king thought of his father, his heart was moved, and he wished to visit him. The queen, however, would not let him go away, and said, "I know well that misfortunes will come upon us if you go." However, he gave her no rest till she agreed. At their parting, she gave him a wishing ring, and said, "Take this ring, and put it on your finger, and then you will immediately be transported with whoever you want to be with. Only promise never to make use of it to bring me to your father's house." Then he said he would do what she asked, and put the ring on his finger, and wished himself at home, just outside the town where his father lived. Instantly he found himself there, and made for the town. But when he came to the gate, the sentries would not let him go in, because he wore such strange and yet such rich and magnificent clothing. So he went up to a neighboring hill, where a shepherd was watching his sheep. He changed his clothes with him, put on his old shepherd's coat, and he passed unknown into the town. When he came to his father, he made himself known to him, but he did not at all believe that the shepherd was his son, and said he certainly had had a son, but that he was dead long ago. However, as he saw he was a poor and needy shepherd, he would not even give him anything to eat. The king, however, still vowed that he was his son, and said, "I am verily your son. Do you know of no mark on my body by which you could recognize me?" "Yes," said his mother. "Our son had a mark, like a raspberry on his right arm." He slipped back his shirt, and they saw the raspberry under his right arm, and no longer doubted that he was their son. Then he told them that he was king of the Golden Mountain, and a king's daughter was his wife, and that they had a fine son of 7 years old. "That is certainly not true. It is a fine kind of king who goes about in a ragged shepherd's coat." At these words the son flew into a passion, and without thinking of his promise, turned his ring round and wished both his wife and child with him. In an instant they stood before him, but the queen wept, and said he had broken his word, and had brought misfortune upon her. He said, "I have done it thoughtlessly, and not with evil intention," and tried to calm her. And she pretended to believe this, but she was not so in truth, and was only thinking how she should punish him. Then he led her out of the town into the field, and showed her the stream where the little boat had been pushed up. And then he said, "I am tired. Sit down. I will sleep a while on your lap." And he laid his head on her lap, and fell asleep. When he was asleep, she first drew the ring from his finger, then she drew away the foot which was under him, leaving only the slipper behind her, and she took her child in her arms, and wished herself back in her own kingdom. When he awoke, there he lay quite deserted, and his wife and child were gone. And so was the ring from his finger. The slipper only was still there as a token. "I can never go back to my father's house," said he. "They would say I am a wizard. I will journey forth into the world till I come again to my kingdom." So he went away, and came at length to a hill by which 3 giants were standing, disputing with each other because they did not know how to divide their father's property. When they saw him passing by, they called to him, and said little man had quick wits, and that he was to divide their inheritance for them. The inheritance, however, consisted of a sword, which had this property, that if anyone took it in his hand and said, "All heads off but mine," every head would lie on the ground. Secondly, of a cloak, which made anyone who put it on invisible. Thirdly, of a pair of boots, which could transport the wearer to any place he wished in a moment. He said, "Give me the 3 things, that I may see if they are still in good condition." They gave him the cloak, and when he had put it on, he was invisible, and changed into a fly. Then he resumed his own form, and said, "The cloak is a good one. Now give me the sword." They said, "No, we will not give you that. If you were to say, 'All heads off but mine,' all our heads would be off, and you alone would be left with yours." Nevertheless, they gave it to him with the condition that he was only to try it against a tree. This he did, and the sword cut into the trunk of a tree as if it had been a blade of straw. Then he wanted to have the boots likewise, but they said, "No, we will not give them. If you have them on your feet, and were to wish yourself at the top of the hill, we should be left down here with nothing." "Oh no," said he, "I will not do that." So they gave him the boots as well. And now when he had got all these things, he thought of nothing but his wife and his child, and said just as it were to himself, "Oh, if I were but on the Golden Mountain." And at the same moment he vanished from the sight of the giants, and thus their inheritance was divided. When he was near his palace, he heard sounds of joy, and fiddles and flutes, and the people told him that his wife was celebrating her wedding with another. He fell into a rage, and said, "False woman! She betrayed and deserted me while I was asleep." So he put on his cloak, and unseen by all went into the palace. When he entered the dining hall, a great table was spread with delicious food, and the guests were eating and drinking and laughing and jesting. She sat on the royal seat in the midst of them in splendid apparel, with a crown on her head. He placed himself behind her, and no one saw him. When she put a piece of meat on a plate for herself, he took it away and ate it, and when she poured out a glass of wine for herself, he took it away and drank it. she was always helping herself to something, and yet she never got anything, for plate and glass disappeared immediately. Then dismayed and ashamed, she arose and went to her chamber and wept. But he followed her there. "Has the devil power over me?" said she to herself. "Was I not once set free? Why then does this enchantment still seem to bind me?" Then he struck her in the face and said, "False and fickle one!" said he. "One indeed came who set you free, and he is now near you again. It is he who has you in his power, you traitress. Have I deserved this treatment from you?" Then he made himself visible, went into the hall, and cried, "The wedding is at an end. The true king has returned." Kings, princes, and counselors who were assembled there ridiculed and mocked him, but he did not trouble to answer them, and said, "Will you go away or not?" On this they tried to seize him and pressed upon him, but he drew his sword and said, "All heads off but mine!" And all the heads rolled on the ground, and he alone was master, once more king of the Golden Mountain.